The snow fell thick and fast, blanketing the small village in a layer of pristine white. The streets were quiet, save for the crunch of boots on the packed snow and the occasional call of a vendor closing up for the evening. 12-year-old Daniel shivered as he trudged through the town square, clutching his thin coat tightly around him. Daniel's family had little to their name. His father worked odd jobs when he could find them, and his mother did laundry for wealthier families in the village. Money was always tight, and luxuries like new clothes or a warm meal were rare. Still, Daniel did his best to help where he could, running errands and collecting firewood to keep their tiny home warm. As he rounded a corner, Daniel spotted an elderly man struggling to push a cart laden with firewood up a snowy hill. The man's breath came in heavy puffs, and his frail arms shook with the effort. "Do you need help, sir?" Daniel called out, hurrying toward him. The old man looked up, his face lined with age and exhaustion. "Yeah, I'd be much obliged, son," he said, his voice wheezy. "These old bones aren't what they used to be." Without hesitation, Daniel grabbed the back of the cart and began to push. The load was heavy and the hill steep, but he dug his heels into the snow and leaned into the task. Together, they slowly made their way to the top, where the man stopped to catch his breath. "Thank you, lad," the man said, wiping his brow. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "It's no trouble," Daniel replied with a smile. "Where are you taking this?" "Just to that cottage over there," the man said, pointing to a small, weathered house at the edge of the village. "It's my home. Let me help you the rest of the way," Daniel offered. The man nodded, his gratitude evident. Together, they pushed the cart to the cottage and unloaded the firewood into a neat stack by the door. By the time they finished, Daniel's hands were numb and his breath came in short gasps, but the satisfaction of helping warmed him from the inside. "Thank you, son," the man said again, his voice full of emotion. "I don't have much, but I can offer you a warm drink and a place to rest for a bit." Daniel hesitated. He knew his mother would be waiting for him, but the thought of a warm drink was too tempting to resist. "All right," he said with a nod. The inside of the cottage was cozy and inviting, with a fire crackling in the hearth and the smell of herbs wafting through the air. The old man motioned for Daniel to sit at the table while he prepared 2 steaming mugs of tea. "What's your name, lad?" the man asked as he placed a mug in front of Daniel. "Daniel," he replied, blowing on the tea to cool it. "What's yours?" "Edward," the man said with a smile. "But you can call me Ed." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their tea and listening to the wind howl outside. Finally, Ed spoke. "You've got a good heart, Daniel. Not many would stop to help an old man on a night like this." "It's just the right thing to do," Daniel said simply. Ed chuckled. "Simple as that, huh? The world could use more people like you." When the tea was finished, Daniel thanked Ed for his hospitality and prepared to leave. The old man walked him to the door, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Take care of yourself, lad," he said, "and thank you again." Daniel nodded, pulling his coat tightly around him as he stepped into the cold night. He didn't know it then, but the events of that evening would change his life forever. The snow continued to fall as Daniel made his way back home, the warmth from Ed's cottage fading with each step. His thoughts lingered on the old man. There was something about Ed that felt different, almost mysterious, though Daniel couldn't quite put his finger on it. By the time he reached his family's small, drafty home, his fingers and toes were numb. His mother was waiting by the fire, her expression a mix of relief and worry. "Daniel, where have you been?" she asked, wrapping a thin blanket around his shoulders. "I was so worried." "I'm sorry, Mama," Daniel said earnestly. "I was helping an old man with his cart. He needed firewood for his house." His mother sighed, her worry softening into a weary smile. "You got a kind heart, son, but you need to look after yourself too. Now, come sit by the fire and warm up." Daniel did as he was told, though his mind was still on Ed. There had been something about the man's smile, the way his gratitude seemed so heartfelt, that left a lasting impression. The next morning, Daniel woke early to the sound of a knock at the door. His father, still groggy from sleep, opened it to find a stranger standing outside, a man dressed in fine clothes with a thick fur-lined cloak shielding him from the cold. "Good morning," the stranger said, his voice warm but commanding. "I'm looking for a boy named Daniel. Does he live here?" Daniel's father furrowed his brow, glancing back at his son who was peeking out from behind his mother. "He does. What's this about?" The man smiled. "I'm here on behalf of someone who wishes to express their gratitude." He stepped aside, revealing a horse-drawn cart loaded with goods. There were bags of flour, crates of fresh vegetables, warm blanket, and even a small chest that glinted with the promise of coins. Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief. "What is all this?" he asked, stepping forward. "This," the man said, gesturing to the cart, "is a gift from Mr. Edward Wells. He told me about the kindness you showed him last night, and he wanted to repay you in kind." "Edward Wells?" Daniel's father repeated, his voice tinged with awe. "You mean the Edward Wells, the wealthy merchant who owns half the mills in this county?" The man nodded. "The very same. He doesn't usually reside in the village, but he's been staying at his old cottage for a time. Your son's actions left quite an impression on him." Daniel's mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Daniel," she whispered, "what have you done to deserve such generosity?" Daniel shook his head, still struggling to process what was happening. "I just helped him with his cart," he said. "That's all." The man smiled knowingly. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the greatest rewards. The family invited the man inside, offering him tea as they discussed the details of the gift. The chest of coins alone was enough to change their fortunes, but the food and supplies were just as valuable. Daniel's parents were overwhelmed with gratitude, but Daniel's thoughts kept drifting back to Ed. He had seemed so humble, so ordinary. How could he be one of the wealthiest men in the region? "I want to thank him," Daniel said suddenly, interrupting the conversation. The man nodded. He anticipated that. "Mr. Wells asked me to tell you that you're welcome to visit him any time at the cottage." That afternoon, Daniel set off for Ed's cottage, his heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. When he arrived, Ed was sitting by the fire, just as he had been the night before. "Daniel," he said warmly, standing to greet him, "I wasn't sure if you'd come." Daniel stepped in, his cheeks flushed from the cold. "I had to," he said. "I don't understand, Mr. Wells. Why did you give us all those things? I didn't do anything special." Ed smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, but you did. You helped a stranger in need without expecting anything in return. That kind of kindness is rare, Daniel, and it's worth rewarding." Daniel hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at him. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Ed chuckled. "Does it matter? If you'd known I was wealthy, would you have treated me any differently?" Daniel thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I wouldn't have." "Exactly," Ed said. "That's why I didn't tell you. I wanted to see your true character, and you didn't disappoint." Daniel sat down, still trying to absorb Ed's words. Cozy warmth of the cottage contrasted with the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "I still don't feel like I deserve all that you gave us," Daniel said after a long pause. "I just did what anyone should do." Ed leaned back in his chair, studying the boy. "That's exactly why you deserve it, lad. Too many people these days would walk by without offering a hand, but you stopped. You gave your time, your energy, and your kindness. That kind of heart deserves to be nurtured." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. The praise made him feel proud, but also shy. "Thank you," he mumbled. Ed smiled kindly. "Gratitude suits you, Daniel. Never lose that." He stood, pulling a bundle wrapped in cloth from a nearby table. "Now, I have one more thing for you." Daniel's eyes widened as Ed placed the bundle in his hands. More? But you've already given us so much. This isn't about giving you more, Ed said. It's about recognizing your potential. Daniel carefully unwrapped the bundle to reveal a set of well-worn but sturdy books. The titles included works on mathematics, science, and even a book of classic stories. I noticed you were curious and bright, Ed explained. These books helped me when I was young. I'd like them to help you too. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he ran his fingers over the spines of the books. Thank you, he whispered, his voice trembling. You're welcome, lad, Ed said. Education is a gift no one can take away from you. Use it wisely, and you can achieve things far beyond what you might think possible. The walk back home felt shorter that day, as if Daniel's excitement carried him over the snow. When he burst through the door, his parents looked up in surprise. Mama, Papa, look what Ed gave me, Daniel exclaimed, showing them the books. His mother took one of the books in her hands, her expression a mixture of awe and pride. These must be worth a fortune, she said softly. Daniel's father placed a hand on his son's shoulder. He sees something in you, Daniel, and so do we. Make the most of this opportunity. In the weeks and months that followed, Daniel threw himself into his studies with a passion he hadn't known he possessed. By the light of the fireplace, he pored over the books, teaching himself concepts that opened up whole new worlds of understanding. Ed became a mentor to Daniel, inviting him over to the cottage regularly to discuss what he had learned. The old man's wisdom and encouragement were a constant source of inspiration. You have a mind for big things, Daniel, Ed told him one afternoon, and a heart to match. Don't ever let anyone tell you what you can't do. Years passed, and Daniel's life transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The knowledge he gained from those books opened doors to opportunities beyond the small village. He earned a scholarship to a prestigious school where he excelled in engineering. No matter how far he went, Daniel never forgot his roots or the man who had believed in him. One snowy day, many years later, Daniel returned to the village, now a grown man with success and purpose etched into his face. He walked to the small, weathered cottage at the edge of town, his heart filled with gratitude. Ed was no longer there. He had passed away peacefully some time ago, but the lessons he had taught Daniel remained. Standing by the fireplace where they had shared so many conversations, Daniel whispered, "Thank you, Ed, for everything." And in his heart, he knew that the kindness he had shown on that snowy evening so long ago had come full circle, shaping not just his own life, but countless others as well.